Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. When my wife and I bought our first house together, it felt like a dream come true. We had spent months scouring listings before finally finding the perfect place. A cute little bungalow with a big backyard right on the edge of town. The neighborhood was quiet, the schools were good, and our new next-door neighbor Ralph seemed like a friendly guy. Life was looking pretty darn great. That is, until Karen moved in across the street. I first met Karen when she marched over to introduce herself the day after moving in. She seemed pleasant enough at first, if a little nosy, asking all sorts of questions about who lived where and how long we'd all been in the neighborhood. I didn't think much of it until a week later when I came home to find her measuring my front yard with a tape measure. When I asked what she was up to, she mumbled something about zoning issues and hurried off. Weird, I thought. But I brushed it off as just an over-eager new homeowner. If only I'd known then what she was really up to. The crazy request started innocently enough. First, Karen asked if she could borrow some shade trees from our backyard to plant on her property. When I declined, she demanded I trim back all branches overhanging onto her yard. Then came the comments anytime I mowed after 5 p.m. on weeknights. Apparently, the noise pollution was interrupting her quiet time. I did my best to shrug it off, not wanting to stoop to her level. But the final straw came on a sunny Saturday morning when I discovered her trying to move the survey stakes marking the property line between our land and Ralph's next door. I watched, dumbfounded from my window, as Karen dug around a metal stake with a shovel, clearly trying to uproot it. "Hey!" I shouted, storming outside. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen glanced up, not the least bit ashamed at being caught red-handed. "Oh, just fixing a mistake," she said, going right back to digging. "This marker is obviously in the wrong spot. Our property extends at least another 5 feet. I struggled to keep my cool. That stake marks the official property line as laid out in county records. You can't just move it wherever you want. "Well, I never agreed to that boundary," Karen huffed, stabbing her shovel angrily at the dirt. "When I bought this place, I was told my land went clear to the end of that big oak tree. I'm just correcting the mistake." At this point, my neighbor Ralph had wandered over to see what the commotion was about. I quickly explained the situation. Ralph's face darkened. "Karen, that stake has been there for nearly 50 years, long before you moved here," he said. "You have no right to touch it. Put down the shovel and move on." Karen straightened up to her full height, cheeks flushed. "How dare you?" she spat. "This is exactly why I need to move the marker over, so I don't have to look at your ugly house." And with that, she went right back to digging, heedless of our protests. Ralph and I looked at each other helplessly. I shook my head. "That's it. I'm calling the county surveyor's office." 10 minutes later, a county vehicle rolled up carrying an official-looking woman wielding a tripod and a serious expression. "All right, what seems to be the problem here?" she asked, eyeing the half-unearthed stake. I quickly explained the situation with Karen while she nodded, lips pressed tightly together. She introduced herself as Marissa, the head county surveyor. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put down that shovel," Marissa said sternly. "Tampering with official property markers is a criminal offense." Karen's eyes narrowed to angry slits. "I'm just fixing a mistake," she insisted. "My neighbor is lying." Marissa surveyed our surroundings, taking notes on her clipboard. After examining the marker from all angles, she turned back to Karen. "This survey stake is in the correct recorded position," she said. "If you have an issue with the property boundary, you'll need to take it up with the county clerk's office. But you cannot move or alter the markers yourself." I felt a rush of relief having an official confirm that Karen was in the wrong. But instead of conceding defeat, she just got more riled up. "This is ridiculous!" Karen shrieked, throwing down her shovel in frustration. "I am entitled to this land! I'll fight this!" Marissa kept her cool. "Ma'am, please go back to your home now so I can repair and document this scene. If you do not cease this behavior, I will call the police." For a second, it looked like Karen might get violent. But with a final hateful glare at me and Ralph, she turned on her heel and stomped back across the street. The county surveyor neatly restored the marker to its original position while I looked on, still in disbelief at what had just happened. "Thank you so much for coming out here," I told Marissa gratefully. "Please let me know if I should file any reports to document this." "Of course," she replied. "I'll be notifying local law enforcement and submitting this incident to keep on record. Your neighbor's actions were completely illegal." About an hour later, a police car rolled up and two officers approached Karen's home. Through my window, I could see them speaking animatedly with her on the front steps. Finally, I saw them slap a pair of handcuffs on her wrists before leading her to the waiting patrol car. Justice at last. The official police report was that Karen was being arrested for criminal property damage and attempting to unlawfully alter legal property boundaries. Thankfully, no charges were filed against me or Ralph since we'd only been trying to stop her illegal activity. In the end, Karen only spent a single night in jail for the incident, but the judge gave her 2 years probation, requiring her to stay at least 50 feet away from the property line at all times. She also had to pay a hefty fine to the county clerk's office for the cost of resurveying and restoring the marker she'd messed with. Needless to say, we haven't had any issues with Karen since. She glowers from her front door whenever she sees Ralph or I outside, but keeps her distance. I almost feel sorry for her, getting into legal trouble for what was essentially a petty neighbor dispute. But then I remember the crazed look on her face as she attacked that survey marker, and any sympathy disappears. She brought this all upon herself. The lesson here is clear. Never underestimate how quickly a seemingly small disagreement between neighbors can escalate into a full-blown legal battle. After this experience, I've learned to tread carefully whenever conflicts arise and keep my cool rather than reacting emotionally. In the end, I'm just glad to have escaped relatively unscathed from my encounter with this homeowner from hell. Going up against a nasty, entitled person like Karen could have cost me a lot more time, money, and stress if I hadn't kept my wits about me. She may have landed herself in jail, but I'm the one who really won in the end simply by preserving my sanity. And my property line. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory: my neighbor, whom we will call David, not a real name, and my other neighbor, whom we will call Karen, not a real name, often got into arguments about who owns what part of the property. They live right next to each other, so this is understandable. Karen was known for being a Karen, so this explains a lot. Karen had just gotten engaged to her boyfriend, whom we will call Kyle, not a real name, who went over to her house a lot, like every other day, and would spend the night there. We saw his car parked there a lot. Kyle would park his car in front of David's lawn because Karen is part of a large family, so they have many cars. Therefore, there is not enough room in the driveway. David got a new camper recently, one of those massive ones that are practically buses. They needed a place to park it because they didn't feel comfortable leaving it in a public place, but Kyle's car was there. Around this same time, news was spreading around my neighborhood that Kyle and Karen had gotten married. Kyle moved in with Karen and started using the front of David's lawn as his assigned parking spot. He was told that it was part of her property because Karen was unaware that property lines exist. There was an incident in the past with a bench and another with a few trees. Eventually, David got tired of Kyle parking where they wanted to park their camper. He had been having to park it down the road in the public camper places, or whatever they are called. He began plotting his revenge. His plan was to park the camper in front of Kyle's car so that he would have to pull out backward. This way, he would have to struggle to get his car out between one of Karen's siblings' cars and the camper. When this plan happened, Kyle came running up to David's door and began shouting the usual, "I'm calling the cops," and whatnot. When David didn't answer, he tried to inch his way out. He ended up bumping into the car behind him and putting a good-sized dent in it. He instantly ran up to Karen's sibling and began apologizing and blamed it on David. Now Karen's entire family was mad at David. David said he saw this through the window and was laughing hysterically. Karen actually managed to think logically for once and blamed it on Kyle, but it was okay and insurance will cover it or something like that. Kyle began going off on Karen about how insurance would charge him for the damage, so they ended up fighting about insurance or whatever. This whole thing unraveled outside David's house, so he listened in through the open window. They then came up to his house. David answered the door, and all of them but Karen instantly started going off about how he caused a dent in Karen's sibling's car. He said that Kyle's car was parked on his property and that he needed to park his camper somewhere. He dug out the property line drawing or whatever and showed them all. Karen was pissed. Karen said that he had drawn those lines himself and that the actual lines were farther to the left, giving her more property and expanding past where Kyle was parked. Keep in mind, Kyle was parked by the windows of David's house, clearly on David's property. At this point, I could hear yelling from a few houses down and walked over to listen for that sweet internet karma. Karen ended up calling the cops because David was disturbing the entire neighborhood. Two cops showed up in a car and instantly sided with David after reviewing the property lines. Karen was fined over $700 for misusing cop. Kyle ended up having to pay $900 for the damages done to the other car. Apparently he broke part of the engine or something. That's not all. Karen and Kyle ended up divorcing because Karen lied to him and said he was on her property, and Karen saying that it was her house so she could lie if she wanted and other things of the sort. The next one is a petty revenge story. Backstory. For the past 2 days, I've been helping my dad with a construction job. Water was leaking from somewhere in the shower, causing wood rot and warped hardwood floors. This is an insurance claim job being processed by a contracting company. We were subcontracted to demolish the bathroom, replace rotten framing, and build new cabinets. A plumber was subcontracted to find and fix the source of the leak. Both my dad and the plumber have worked with this company for decades. The plumber had been sent to this house before the demolition but couldn't find the leak. He was rescheduled to come today after we demolished it yesterday. The woman who owns this home is very rude and behaves like an absolute Karen, which is what we'll name her. When we showed up yesterday at 8 a.m. as scheduled, Karen yelled at us, literally, for interrupting her exercise routine and made us wait outside for almost an hour before allowing us to come in and start working. When Karen decided she wanted to take a shower in the adjacent bathroom, she made us leave the house and wait outside until she was done. When we came back inside, the bathroom was soaking wet. We found the source of the leak was a cracked copper pipe in the wall behind layers of tile and sheetrock. There was no way the plumber could have found this before the demolition. My dad called the company and let them know this was a serious problem that needed to be fixed immediately. They called the plumber and scheduled him to come back this morning to replace the pipe. We were all ready to go inside Karen's house and start working at 8 a.m. No one was home, and they had locked a deadbolt that required a different key than the one provided in the lockbox. We waited outside while Karen's husband came home to unlock it. Once we got inside and started setting up to begin working, Karen arrived. Karen started yelling at the plumber. Karen, I don't understand how you missed this the first time you came. These guys found the problem in like 2 hours, and they're not even plumbers. Plumber, yes, ma'am, sorry about that. I couldn't find the problem earlier because the leak was behind a wall. Karen, you're a plumber. You should have known to look behind the wall where the pipes are. Plumber, sorry, ma'am, I don't demolish walls. When I came out earlier, I checked. Karen, you didn't check anything. If you checked, you would have found the leak. You wasted my time, and I'm not paying for that, and I'm going to call your company and let them know about your mistake. Don't you walk away from me. Who do you think you are? Where are you going? The plumber is a 65-year-old man who doesn't like being yelled at. He just leaves. Karen yells at him all the way outside, and as he's driving off, she calls the supervisor and yells at him about how the plumber left and needs to come back right now to fix her pipe. The plumber never comes back. The supervisor shows up about an hour later and lets Karen know the plumber has refused to work for her, and she will need to find her own plumber to fix the pipe and file that claim separately with her insurance. This whole job was on a very tight schedule to be completed before Christmas. Until the pipe is fixed, we cannot replace the framing, sheetrock and tile work cannot be done, a shower cannot be installed, etc. Everything was scheduled to be done on time. Now, everything has been canceled because this is a busy time of year and people cannot adjust their schedules easily. She can find a plumber to fix the leak, more like a spray now, before Christmas, but there's absolutely no chance she'll have a fully restored bathroom by then. Too bad for you, Karen. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I live in a housing cooperative. I have no idea if there is something equivalent in other countries, but I live in Norway. It's essentially where you own your own apartment. But the cooperative owns the buildings and the land. If you're going to make changes to the building, you'll have to apply for a permit. Otherwise, it's generally do as you please, as long as you don't bother your neighbors. Anyways, I put up a small greenhouse on my private patio, as many others had done, but not this exact type. This was an aluminum construction, not a frame with a loose plastic cover kind. The building manager, who is best described as a triple Karen, threw a fit. She actually watched me spend 3 days assembling the greenhouse. Then the next day she called me and threw a fit. not because I put up a greenhouse, but because I had used screws to fasten it to the patio for stability. Apparently, I was not allowed to use screws on the floorboards, as this was considered changes to the building in her mind. And I had destroyed the floorboards. Never mind, the whole patio was built with, wait for it, screws through the floorboards. Screws in the wall were okay, she'd told me in response to me asking about why she'd put up shelves on her patio herself. But not the floorboards. Apparently, the difference was monumental, and everyone should just know this intuitively. Nowhere, literally nowhere, does it say fastening things to the floorboards or putting screws in the floorboards is not allowed. Not in the house rules, my contract, or in the National Housing Cooperative Law. But she was furious I had done this. I took a deep breath, and as I am quite creative, I immediately thought of a workaround. I'll just put it on wheels then. I made a big number of saying that fastening was essential because otherwise, the greenhouse would not be stable enough to withstand wind. She said she understood this, but I had now ruined the co-op's property. And this was a really serious matter. She told me to send an application for a permit to see if she could find a way to get approval from the board. But she could not guarantee I could keep it, she said, with the fakest of sympathies. So I sent the application with photos, saying what I had done, and that I didn't think I had to apply to do it, as I never considered putting in a prefabricated greenhouse would be seen as changes to the building. My application was rejected, as I anticipated, but she worded the rejection exactly as I hoped she would. I was not allowed to put in a fastened greenhouse, and she probably thought she'd been clever when she included that I was not allowed to put the greenhouse on my front lawn either. I had worked the "it needs to be fastened to be stable" angle hard because I hoped she, as the Karen she is, would fall for that reverse psychology. So I proceeded to put the greenhouse on wheels. I made a frame from 2x4s and put 8 small furniture wheels under the frame. I then lifted and screwed the greenhouse onto the frame. I put some boards on the sides just above the ground to stop the draft. Boom! Mobile greenhouse. I can slide it all over the patio. I put some hooks in the walls and used transport straps to secure the whole thing to the wall for stability. The walls were okay to put screws in, remember? So in effect, my greenhouse is now in the exact same location, 4 inches taller, and with ugly blue ribbons tying it to the wall. And the patio now has 22 open screw holes, ready to be filled with rainwater in the fall. But oh well, as she's repeatedly told me, it's not my patio. Then I sent an orientation email to the building manager with photos and videos of the sliding greenhouse, with the rest of the board members on copy, where I explained in detail what I had done, and how every step was in compliance with the rejection email I had received, which I of course included. I said the greenhouse was now to be considered a piece of mobile patio furniture, just like my sofa and chairs were, and that I now considered this subject to be a closed matter. I have not heard a single word from any of them. It's been over a week. I think I got her. I can't imagine she'll find a loophole that lets her legally dictate what patio furniture is allowed, and not in the co-op since the patios are stated to be for every apartment owner's private usage. So, when Christmas comes, I'm planning to decorate the greenhouse with lights. Make it pretty. Because every time Karen steps out of her front door, she has to face my patio where she is looking straight at my greenhouse. The least I can do is make it pretty for her, right? The next one is an entitled people story. I really don't even like to call him my brother anymore. I don't consider him one, but for the sake of simplicity, that's what I'll call him here. I'm turning 17 on the 29th, and this monster is 15. He's been abusive for years. It started off with him lying constantly and being a nuisance to those around him, at home and school. Then he started to get rough. He'd play rough and hit hard. Soon after, he started to bully my little sister, which is when he and I started to fight physically and argue constantly. I'd leave marks via scratches, and he'd punch and kick, so I'd be the only one to leave marks, which led to me being blamed for everything and punished while he got away scot-free. Starting about 5 years ago, EB has gotten way worse. He's ordering people around as if he were an adult, drawing weapons to hurt us and hitting us constantly. He takes whatever he wants, breaks things, ruins the state of the house, tortures my cats, and so much more. No adults do anything about it. Mom only blames it on his ADHD, which he refuses to take medication for. Dad doesn't get involved, and everyone else just doesn't seem to understand. He tried to beat me with a hammer and a drill for taking my cat out of his room, and when I ran to Mom, she just scolded me for not telling her about it. But every time I do, she brushes me off. Today he tried to beat me with a pole for not putting a box in the recycling bin. He also cursed me out because I broke the garage door down after he locked me inside. He called me a psycho and yelled that all I know how to do is break things. Even though he broke my door down because I put a lock on it, so did my mom. On top of all of that, EB is spoiled. Mom lets him do whatever he wants. She lets him order us around, and she justifies him beating me because she thinks that I was super mean to him as a kid and blames me for him being like this. She blamed me for him starting a fire in the kitchen. She blames me for everything he does. Can someone help me? I need to get a job so I can move out ASAP when I'm 18. I need someone to just parent me for a bit since my own parents can't or don't. Update, I will call the police soon, sooner than planned. He got mad again and tried to take my sister's bed. I, of course, got in the way and told him to leave. He got more and more upset, and finally, after I pushed him back once more, he started swinging. I have a bit of a pain tolerance, so I didn't actually feel anything, but my sister still tried to save me and tried to get in the way. I pushed her out of the way and pushed him off. Then he started to lie, even though there was no one there to lie to but himself, saying that I hit him when I literally didn't, not even when he was hitting me. He even tried to pick me up and move me out of the way, so I pushed up against the wall and pulled his hood over his face. And after that, he started going crazy again. I gave my sister my phone and told her to call the police, Mom or my dad, which she called Mom. Mom told him off and he left. Then she called my dad, who was useless. He tried avoiding the problem by asking why we weren't at school. The bus never came. Why didn't we walk? It's super hot and humid outside, and I have asthma. The school is 30 minutes away. Why are we blaming my brother for not going to school? We weren't. Then he starts blowing up for no reason and hangs up. Mom is becoming tired of EB, and Dad is trying to avoid disciplining him. Now that I think about it, I guess really no one has ever really disciplined him, ever. I'm going to talk to Mom about getting him in a hospital or something, or else I'm going to call the police next time. Why didn't I want to call the police? We're African American people. If they hear that there's a crazy and violent black kid, he's more than likely getting shot on sight. This is just how it is. I wouldn't care, but I know my mom wouldn't want to lose a kid, and Dad wouldn't want to lose his first boy. I want to resolve this in a way that EB can get help. Being locked up or killed won't help at all. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.